Krea 2 can finally be used like an image editing model. Let's look at the results first. In this original image, the character is wearing white and light green hanfu. I wrote one editing instruction: change the clothing to a red and black color scheme and add golden embroidery. As a result, the clothing changed, but the character's face, hairstyle, round fan in her hand, and the pavilion and lake behind her were basically preserved. Now let's look at this image. This time, I removed the fan from her hand. You'll notice that the fan really disappears, and the hands do not turn into a blurry mess of color. In a two-character image, this model also performs very well. I asked the two people on the left and right to swap positions. As a result, the red-clothed female warrior moved to the left, and the woman in white moved to the right. The binding between the characters and their props is still correct. Finally, let's look at dual reference images. The first image is a stormy hall with no character. The second image is a reference image of a female warrior. In the first edit, we place the female warrior into the hall. Then we use that result as a new scene image and add a second ancient-style woman, the face's clothing. And props of the two characters do not obviously get mixed together. At this point, many people may feel like this model is already flawless, but that's not really the case. Here is a rainy night running example. I tested different parameters, but the result always duplicated a second person. So in this video, our tests include both successful cases and failed cases. How many tests did I do in total? I did 48 tests in ComfyUI. Overall, this LoRA performs quite well. Of course, there are also some impractical parts, and I'll point those out too. For easier demonstration, I also built the workflow on Running Hub. In the ComfyUI space, Running Hub is a very solid online workflow platform because whenever a new model or new extension appears, it follows up right away. Running Hub also provides an online communication platform for ComfyUI creators, where you can find a lot of creative inspiration and example workflows. First, the model we're using this time is a LoRA called Krea 2 Identity Edit. Its main function actually has two parts. The first is maintaining character consistency. The second is giving Krea 2 editing ability. The installation part is simple because the installation itself is very easy. First, we need to install an extension called ComfyUI Krea 2 Edit. Download it into your custom nodes folder, then restart ComfyUI. This node itself has no extra Python dependencies, so we only need to download the corresponding LoRA model. Also, pay attention here. The model repository provides two versions. One is 128 reals, and the other is 64 reals. Here, we'll provide two sets of workflows. One is called single reference, which is used to edit one original image. The other is called two reference, which has two input images. The first image is the scene, and the second image is the character you want to place into it. Next, let's look at the first one, single reference editing. We'll use the single reference workflow to run the simplest clothing change workflow. It looks like there are quite a lot of nodes, but only a few groups really affect the result. On the left, load image loads our reference image, then it goes through Vine code, and then enters Krea to edit model patch. Here, I set the LoRA strength to 1.0. Then we use a rewritten encoder called Krea 2 Edit Grounded encode, and we input the prompt. What I wrote is, change the character's white and light green hanfu into red and black silk hanfu with golden embroidery. The second half of the prompt is very important. We need to emphasize that it should preserve the character's face, hairstyle, camera angle, background, and lighting. This is the biggest difference between an edit prompt and a normal prompt. For ordinary editing, I recommend simply turning on the turbo route. This way, we use 8-step sampling, set CFG to 1, set the LoRA strength to 1.0, and set the turbo LoRA strength, which is the acceleration model strength, to 0.8. There is also a parameter called grounding EPX, and here we set it to 760. 8. The output aspect ratio should stay as close to the original image as possible. This is actually quite important. After clicking Run, we get this hanfu result. Focus on the face, hairstyle, round fan in the hand, and the background railing. These areas are not heavily redrawn, so the first image proves two things. First, it can correctly perform a clothing change. Second, it does have a certain level of local editing ability. Next, we divide the single character tests into 3 groups. The first group is local attribute editing. We add a phoenix hair ornament to the character, add a slight expression, change a white suit into a silver gown, and change short hair into wet long hair. Take a look at the overall results. This whole group is relatively stable. The model can usually locate the correct region while keeping the character and background as much as possible. If your task is changing clothes, changing colors, changing hairstyle, adding accessories, or making slight expression edits, I think this LoRA is very useful. For prompts, you can remember a simple structure, editing action plus clear object plus target result plus the content that must remain unchanged. The second group is adding, deleting, and replacing objects. There is one very important difference here. When replacing objects, you can use the Turbo 8-step route. But if you are deleting a prominent object, it's better to switch to the raw model, which means turning off the Turbo LoRA, use at least 20 sampling steps, and set CFG to 3.0. This gives a more consistent result. The third group is large-scale scene changes, pose changes, and camera changes. This group is not very stable from the start. For example, we move the ancient-style character into a snowy night. The model does generate snow and a night scene, but it also keeps many structures from the original image, like the pavilion and building elements. Then let's look at two-character editing, where there are two people in one image. Look at this image. On the left, there is a girl in white and blue hanfu holding a lantern. On the right, there is a female warrior wearing red and black martial clothing, with a high ponytail and a long sword. In the first test, I only modified the clothing of the person on the left. You can see that the model does locate this person. And the clothing does become light gold. In this case, prompt writing also requires some technique. Don't just write "change her dress" at minimum. Give specific identifying conditions. For example, the woman on the left wearing white and holding a lantern. Or the woman on the right wearing red and black martial clothing with a high ponytail. In other words, use position plus clothing, position plus hairstyle, or position plus prop. In the second test, we asked the character on the right to draw her sword, while the character on the left and the lantern remain unchanged. The result is okay, except that the generated sword has a small issue. The third test is harder. We want the two characters to swap left and right positions. As a result, the red-clothed character moves to the left, and the white-clothed character moves to the right. The identity binding is still correct. In the fourth test, we directly delete the character on the right. As I mentioned earlier, here I recommend using the raw model with 20 sampling steps and changing CFG to 3.0. The character disappears completely, and the background is naturally filled in. Another group of fashion-style two-person images gives us a similar conclusion. Changing only the green dress on the right into a blue dress works. Replacing the person on the right with a silver-skinned elf with long white hair also works. The character on the left is basically unaffected. Next, let's look at two-reference, which means placing a reference character into a specified scene. The first reference image is an ancient hall in a storm. The second reference image is an Eastern female warrior in red and black clothing. The prompt asks the model to place the female warrior from the second image in the center of the hall from the first image while preserving her face. High ponytail, red hair ribbon, clothing, armor, and long sword. In the result, the character's perspective, the floor reflections, the firelight, and the environmental light from the lightning all blend quite naturally. There is no obvious pasted on feeling. But for two characters, don't put two reference characters in at the very beginning. A more stable method is chained insertion. First, use the scene and add character A, then get one output, then use that first output as the new image 1, and use character B as image 2. Here, we add a girl in white and blue hanfu, holding a lantern in the final result, the two characters' faces, clothing, and props basically remain separated. There is a very important parameter here called grounding EPX. You can understand it as a control relationship between editing, obedience, and identity, similarity. If you set the value relatively low, for example, around 384 to 512, the model may be more willing to execute changes in scene and action. Personally, I think 768 is a balance point. If you don't know what value to use, you can set it to 768. Finally, let's look at a failed case. In the original image, there is a fashionable woman holding an umbrella. The prompt asks the same woman to run through a rainy night street while looking back at the camera. but the result adds an extra person. We can change grounding FPX from 384 to 512, then to 768, and finally to 1024. But none of these changes solve the issue. The sampling steps are the same. There are still two characters, so the problem may not be in the parameters. What is the more likely reason? The model may have understood running and looking back as two states of the same person at different moments, and then drew both states at the same time. So when you run into this kind of task, you should try changing the prompt instead of spending too much effort on parameters. Finally, let me give you the conclusion. Krea 2 Identity Edit is best suited for single-person clothing changes, color changes, hairstyle, accessories, and slight expression edits, adding, deleting, and replacing objects in place, editing a specified character inside a two-person image, placing a reference character into a new scene, and using chained workflows to add a second character. For large-scale scene changes, camera changes, and complex two-person interactions, the completion quality may not be as good. But no matter what, it really does give Krea 2 a very strong editing entry point. Alright, that's all for today. What are you waiting for? Go try it yourself. Follow me and become someone who truly understands AI.